Baseball-sized ice just fell out of the sky over New England, and it may have broken a record that stood for more than 50 years. Nobody predicted hail this size, but meteorologists say the heat wave sitting right before it is exactly what made it possible, and that connection is the part almost nobody talks about. It happened over the 4th of July weekend, right in the middle of an already sweltering stretch of summer that had gripped much of the Northeast for days. A complex of storms rolled through the southern half of southern New England, and inside that complex sat a handful of supercell thunderstorms, the same kind of storm responsible for producing the largest hail on the planet. Reports came in from Bristol, Plainville, and New Britain, Connecticut, describing hail up to 3 inches wide, roughly the size of a baseball. Behind those storms came a strong line of wind, damaging enough on its own to leave more than 100,000 people without power. Here's why that 3-inch measurement matters so much, and why meteorologists across the region took notice almost immediately. Connecticut's previous hail record stood at 2 3/4 inches, first set back in 1969, then matched again in 1995. According to meteorologists with the National Weather Service, there is no confirmed report of 3-inch hail in the state since records have been kept. If the measurements hold up, this storm did not just add to the record books. It broke a mark that had survived for more than half a century. So why did this particular storm produce hail that size, large enough to dent cars and shatter glass within seconds? The answer traces directly back to the heat wave sitting right before it. In the days leading up to the 4th of July, temperatures at Bradley International Airport pushed past 90 degrees for 3 consecutive days. According to Bryce Williams, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, that heat did not simply disappear once the storms arrived. It fed them. Williams described the atmosphere at the time as extremely conducive to thunderstorms, explaining that the system simply did not run out of energy as it moved across the state. This is the mechanism scientists keep pointing back to. Hail does not form despite the heat. In many cases, it forms because of it. A prolonged heat wave loads the atmosphere with warm, moisture-rich, unstable air near the ground. When that unstable air finally gets lifted rapidly, usually by an approaching cold front or a shift in the jet stream, it fuels extremely powerful updrafts inside a thunderstorm. Those updrafts are the engine behind large hail. The stronger the updraft, the longer a piece of ice can stay suspended inside the storm, cycling up and down, adding layer after layer of ice each time, like a snowball rolling through a freezer that never stops. This was not an isolated event either. That same summer, a similar sequence played out during a historic heat dome that gripped the eastern United States. Storms breaking that heat wave are believed to have produced what may be the largest hailstone ever recorded in Connecticut's history, part of a broader outbreak that knocked out power to more than 1.3 million homes and businesses across the region. The pattern was consistent. Extreme heat builds for days. Then a collapse arrives, and it does not arrive quietly. To put these newer records in perspective, it helps to look at the benchmark that still stands above all of them. The largest hailstone ever officially recorded in the United States fell near Vivian, South Dakota, back in 2010. It measured 8 inches in diameter and weighed nearly 2 pounds, roughly the size of a volleyball. For years, that stone was treated as a once-in-a-generation outlier, a freak result of an exceptionally rare combination of atmospheric conditions. What has scientists paying closer attention now is how often storms in recent years have come within striking distance of that mark, something that almost never happened in previous decades. Connecticut is not the only place where this exact link between heat and record hail has shown up recently. In Illinois, earlier this year, a violent supercell tore through the Kankakee area during a severe weather outbreak that also produced multiple tornadoes. A meteorologist at Northern Illinois University personally collected a hailstone from the wreckage and measured it back at his lab. It came in at just over 7 inches wide, more than 1.5 pounds in weight, easily surpassing the state's previous record of 4 3/4 inches. That storm system, like the one in Connecticut, developed in an atmosphere loaded with instability following a stretch of unusually warm weather. Texas has seen its own version of this story too. A hailstone found in the Texas Panhandle, discovered by a storm chaser during a tornadic supercell, was eventually confirmed using advanced photogrammetry and AI-based measurement techniques to be 7.1 inches in diameter, wider than a regulation NFL football. That stone broke the state's previous record, which itself had only been set a few years earlier. Meteorologists tracking hail trends note that Texas has now broken its own state hail record multiple times within just the last several years, a pattern that used to take decades to repeat. Understanding exactly how a hailstone grows to that size helps explain why the connection to heat matters so much. Hail begins as a tiny piece of ice formed when a supercooled water droplet freezes onto a small particle high inside a thunderstorm's updraft. From there, the stone gets carried repeatedly up and down within the storm by powerful currents of rising and sinking air. Each pass through the wettest part of the cloud adds another layer of ice, similar to how an onion builds up in concentric rings. The stone keeps growing for as long as the updraft is strong enough to hold it aloft. The moment gravity finally overpowers that updraft, the hailstone falls, whatever size it has reached by that point. A weak, ordinary thunderstorm might only manage pea-sized hail before losing that battle. A supercell fueled by a collapsing heatwave can sustain updrafts strong enough to keep a stone airborne long enough to grow to the size of a baseball, a softball, or in rare cases, even larger. Scientists studying hail formation say this is not a coincidence scattered across a few unlucky storms. It reflects a broader shift happening inside the atmosphere itself. Research published this year found that recent hail seasons in Europe alone caused record financial losses exceeding €5 billion, with scientists specifically flagging an increase in large, damaging hailstones as a growing concern. One researcher involved in the work said plainly that seeing record hailstones repeatedly in recent years is deeply concerning, especially because most homes are still not designed or built to withstand impacts of that size, whether in the United States or internationally. Climate scientists explain the connection using fairly straightforward physics, even if the storms themselves look anything but simple. Warmer air holds more moisture. More moisture means more fuel available for a thunderstorm once conditions allow it to develop. At the same time, extreme heat building near the surface increases what meteorologists call instability, essentially the difference in temperature between the hot air near the ground and the colder air high above it. Greater instability produces stronger updrafts. Stronger updrafts are capable of holding larger, heavier hailstones aloft for longer before gravity finally wins and they fall to the ground. Put simply, hotter heat waves tend to set the stage for bigger hail once the eventual storm arrives. This is exactly why meteorologists say the collapse of a heat wave deserves just as much attention as the heat itself, if not more. People spend days bracing for high temperatures, checking heat advisories, and staying indoors during peak afternoon hours. But the moment relief finally arrives in the form of storms, most people relax immediately, assuming the worst is past. In reality, the atmosphere at that exact moment is often primed to produce some of the most damaging, least predictable weather of the entire event, including hail large, enough to total vehicles, shatter windows, and tear through roofing material within seconds. Insurance data backs up just how expensive this shift has become. Hail-related claims have climbed sharply over the past several years, with roofing and auto glass repairs making up a large share of the total damage bill after any major outbreak. Researchers tracking this trend argue that current building standards were largely written around historical hail sizes, meaning most roofing materials, skylights, and siding in use today were never actually tested against stones in the 3, 5, or 7-inch range that keep showing up in recent outbreaks. That gap between what structures were designed to withstand and what storms are now actually producing is part of why researchers describe this trend as deeply concerning rather than simply an interesting statistical anomaly. The financial toll from these hail events has become significant enough that researchers now say hail alone causes more overall damage in some years than tornadoes do, and in certain seasons, more than multiple hurricanes combined. Unlike wind damage or flooding, hail damage tends to be widespread rather than concentrated in a narrow path, meaning a single severe storm can leave dented cars, shattered skylights, and damaged roofs scattered across dozens of neighborhoods within a matter of minutes. So what should people actually watch for once a heat wave shows signs of breaking? Meteorologists point to a few reliable warning signs. Towering, rapidly growing clouds appearing after days of persistent heat and clear skies are often the first visual clue that a storm is organizing quickly. A sudden drop in temperature, combined with a sharp shift in wind direction, can signal an approaching outflow boundary, frequently arriving minutes before the heaviest hail and rain. Darkening, greenish-tinted skies are a signal meteorologists take particularly seriously, often associated with the kind of powerful hail-producing supercells responsible for many of these record-breaking events. Officials recommend a few direct precautions once conditions like these develop. Move vehicles into a garage or covered structure if a severe storm warning is issued, since parked cars are among the most common casualties of large hail. Stay away from windows and skylights during the height of a storm, since hail large enough to break glass can do so without much warning. And treat any warning mentioning large or giant hail as seriously as a tornado warning itself, since stones exceeding 2 inches in diameter are capable of causing serious injury to anyone caught outside. The bigger pattern researchers are tracking goes beyond any single storm. Multiple state hail records have fallen within just the past couple of years alone, a pace that stands out sharply compared to the historical record, where similar records often stood untouched for decades at a time. Scientists studying this trend link it directly to a warming atmosphere, capable of holding more moisture and generating stronger instability. exactly the ingredients needed to produce hail on a scale that used to be exceptionally rare. Before you go, if you want to understand how these connections between heat and severe weather keep showing up across the country, make sure you like this video and subscribe, because we track these patterns closely as new records continue to fall. The heat wave that came before this storm did not disappear when the clouds finally rolled in. It became the fuel. And based on how many hail records have already fallen this year alone, meteorologists say this almost certainly will not be the last one broken before the season is over. Pay attention the next time your local forecast mentions a heat wave finally breaking down into storms. That transition is not just a return to normal weather. It is often the exact window when the atmosphere has the most energy available to produce something record-breaking, and increasingly, that record does not take 50 years to fall anymore.